We are confronted with so many crises simultaneously. What does it need to master the future?
Winston Churchill, when he said, never let a good crisis go to waste. That was in the mid-1940s. But how is this term now, never let a good, being used today? Never let a good crisis go to waste. When you look at these globalists, I mean, would they go as far as...
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died. Experts agree unless it is quickly controlled, it could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere.
The mission of the Pandemic Emergency Board is to provide recommendations to deal with the major global challenges arising in response to an unfolding pandemic. The board is comprised of highly experienced leaders from business, public health, and civil society.
We could be looking at double the number of cases in 1 week and 16 times as many in a month if we are not able to stop the spread.
Start of what's looking like it will be a severe pandemic. And there are problems emerging that can only be solved by global business and governments working.
We have known about cap-like viruses in animals and people for decades.
So the policy crisis in question for this board in this meeting is this. How should governments, business, and international organizations allocate and distribute pandemic antivirals and medical supplies?
The UN has a worldwide footprint, universally recognized, and universal membership.
The question is, can you, through this international mechanism, really promote commitments to doing this as quickly as possible and give people a sense that actually if they contribute more, that they will have a better chance of protecting their own populations and their country's security and health.
Countries are reacting in different ways as to how best to manage the overwhelming amounts of and misinformation circulating over the internet. In some cases, limited internet shutdowns are being implemented to quell panic.
How much control of information should there be, and by whom? And how can false information be effectively challenged?
At a moment where the social media platforms have to step forward and recognize the moment to assert that they're a technology platform and not a broadcaster is over.
And low expectation. Businesses were not borrowing, banks were not lending. Everyone was just hoping to hunker down and weather the storm. Economists say the economic turmoil caused by such a pandemic will last for years, perhaps a decade. The societal impacts, the loss of faith in government, the distrust of news, and the breakdown of social cohesion could last even longer. We have
sufficient attention to the frightening scenario of a comprehensive cyber attack, which would bring to a complete halt to the power supply, transportation, hospital services, our society as a whole. The COVID-19 crisis would be seen in this respect as a small disturbance in comparison to a major cyber attack.
Until today, nobody had the necessary computing power and the necessary data to hack humanity. We have algorithms that can understand me better than I understand myself. They could predict my desires, manipulate my emotions, and even take decisions on my behalf. Developing even bigger powers than ever before, we are really acquiring divine powers of creation and destruction. We are really upgrading humans into gods. We are acquiring, for instance, the power to re-engineer life. Are now hackable animals. You know, the whole idea that humans have, you know, they have this soul or spirit and they have free will and nobody knows what's happening inside me. So whatever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will, that's over.
Does this sound like a conspiracy to you? It's not a theory anymore, because they're telling you right out what they're doing. Years ago, someone told me, says, once they come right out and tell you what they're doing, then you worry, because they really believe that they have the power. Let's just go back now to this brief statement by President Trump in Davos from 2020, when there were still many COVID questions going on about what was this all about. Play that.
They predicted an overpopulation crisis in the 1960s, mass starvation in the 70s, and an end of oil in the 1990s. These alarmists always demand the same thing: absolute power to dominate, transform, and control every aspect of our lives. We will never let radical socialists destroy our economy, wreck our country, or eradicate our liberty.
Was that President Trump actually calling out the Economic Forum at the World Economic Forum? They're all fearmongers.
So pleased to see you back here in Davos, because I remember before you assumed your position as Vice President of the United States, you came here as a senator, you came here as the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee of the Senate. And I have to say, in my memory, you were one of the most engaged and hardest working participants here at the annual meeting.
In the need to develop a capacity to know what potential enemies are doing, the United States government has perfected a technological capability that enables us to monitor the messages that go through the air. I know the capacity that is there to make tyranny total in America. And we must see to it that this agency and all agencies that possess this technology operate within the law and under proper supervision, so that we never cross over that abyss. That's the abyss from which there is no return. The most careful effort to combine together in resistance to the government, no matter how privately it was done, is within the reach of the government to know.
We couldn't meet at a more challenging time. We are confronted with so many crises simultaneously. What does it need to master the future? I think to have a platform where all stakeholders of global society are engaged.
It's pretty extraordinary that we, select group of human beings, because of whatever touched us at some point in our lives, are able to sit in a room and come together and actually talk about saving the planet. I mean, it's so almost extraterrestrial to think about, quote, saving the planet. And if you said that to most people, they think you're just a crazy tree-hugging, lefty, liberal, do-gooder, whatever, and there's no relationship. But really, that's where we are.
Look at the xenophobia and political authoritarian trends that have come from just a few million refugees. What about 1 billion? We would lose our capacity for self-governance on this world. We have to act.
Clear and present danger of disinformation is our conversation here this afternoon. It follows a session just now about disrupting distrust, and of course those are connected, so I hope that's where we can start. I'm Brian Stelter, formerly of CNN, now a fellow at Harvard University. A reminder that the hashtag is WEF23. We can try to put some real information out into the world to make up for all the crazy.
The forum would never be in existence without my stay here. And today, I have to say, we have further developed the stakeholder concept. So when we look at all the challenges in the world, we know that those problems, environment, terrorism, whatever you name it, can only be solved through collaborative efforts of all stakeholders. And that's what the forum is today. I'm just coming out of, we had a meeting the last 2 days, and I'm proud because the forum now, as an official international organization for public-private cooperation, has become much more than a meeting or meetings. In New York, we brought together 800 stakeholders for really a big workshop and so many concrete ideas with tremendous impact came out.
Till today, nobody had the necessary computing power and the necessary data to hack humanity. Even if the Soviet KGB or the Spanish Inquisition followed you around everywhere, 24 hours a day, watching everything you do, listening to everything you say, still, they didn't have the computing power and the biological knowledge necessary to make sense of what was happening inside your body and brain and to understand how you feel and what you think and what you want. Whether viruses or bananas or humans, they are really just biochemical algorithms. You will not be able to hide from Amazon and Alibaba and the secret police. As you surf the internet, as you watch videos or check your social feed, the algorithms will be monitoring your eye movements, your blood pressure, your brain activity. We have algorithms that can understand me better than I understand myself. They could predict my desires, manipulate my emotions, and even take decisions on my behalf. Developing even bigger powers than ever before, we are really acquiring divine powers of creation and destruction. We are really upgrading humans into gods. We are acquiring, for instance, the power to re-engineer life. Are now hackable animals. You know, the whole idea that humans have, you know, they have this soul or spirit and they have free will and nobody knows what's happening inside me. So whatever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will, that's over.
So they're going to make decisions for us. Wait a minute. This almost sounds like we're going back to monarchies, emperors, and czars who are going to make decisions for us. That wasn't what 1775 and 1776 was all about. 50 years this organization was in place, slowly whittling at the freedoms of the world, claiming they want to help the world. But I don't see one face there that I trust to make any of these decisions for me. Did you trust them to make decisions for you? After seeing that 2-in-1 event, was that really done to save the planet, to save the world, in case of a pandemic? Or do you think maybe we're using the anti-thesis synthesis issue here to gain control? So all these people that have been saying for 50 years that you've been a conspiracy theorist, or even recently when you start asking these questions, well, there's proof. There's something going on. It's not a theory. It more sounds like a conspiracy, and they're trying to convince you it's for the greater good.
I created the forum as a not-for-profit foundation. with the idea in mind of a global village where all stakeholders could interact on the most important issues of our time. Over the last 50 years, after the initial Davos meeting in 1971, we strengthened our convening power, integrating really the top leaders from government, business and civil society.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Klaus. We're definitely privileged and thankful that you've come back, and we want to thank you not only for what you've done for this school, but what you've done for the world. You've devoted your life to making the world a better place, something which goes to the heart of what the Kennedy School is all about. It's been striking to us as we've had the pleasure, and this goes back to Dean Elwood, that when you brought the Young Global Leaders Program here for executive education and the Schwab Fellows. But there are two countries in the world now in which the young global leaders have emerged. Tell us just a bit about that in terms of the governance.
Yes, actually, this notion to integrate young leaders is part of the World Economic Forum since many years. And I have to say, when I mention now names like Mrs. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. Mm-hmm. But what we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are for our actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
And then, all through history, there has been all forms of secret societies and other stuff. It's all documented. It's written down. We actually have documents. We have the actual documents. But the big question here is, how much influence does this Davos agenda really have over our governments and our daily affairs?
Exorcisms to flimsy vax recommendations. The FDA has officially asked its panel of advisors to approve an annual COVID shot for healthy adults, similar to the influenza campaigns meant at combating the flu. Now, forget potential side effects, adverse reactions. A new study that reveals that any protection gained from booster shots wanes rapidly. But would an annual shot be any different? Joining me now, Dr. Marty Makary from Johns Hopkins. He's a professor there, author of The Price We Pay. Dr. Makary, what is going on with this shiftaroo at the FDA?
Well, there's an agenda from the White House, and it's coming right from Ashish Jha and Dr. Fauci that's saying we need an indefinite vaccination policy for life. So that means a 12-year-old girl will get 60 mRNA vaccine doses in her average lifetime. And they're ignoring the 1 in 5,000 risk of myocarditis in young males. They're ignoring the 1 in 800 risk of severe adverse events. Now, these are well documented. These are from big studies. This is no longer an idea or a small anecdotal experience. And all this for a bivalent vaccine for which we don't know the efficacy. There's no randomized controlled trial. And the FDA advisors that you mentioned learned that Moderna was hiding data that the bivalent vaccine they developed actually had more infections in the vaccine arm of the trial than in the placebo arm. And they're pretty upset that they didn't see that data.
Well, the World Health Organization, Dr. Makary, you're going to be shocked to hear this. The Director General there is actually taking shots at folks like you.
Too many people are behind on their boosters, and there is a torrent of pseudoscience and misinformation circulating, which is undermining trust in safe and effective tools for COVID-19.
Dr. Makary, pseudoscience? I mean, a lot of people won't even call these shots vaccines since they don't prevent transmission or infection. But he's accusing people of pseudoscience here.
Look, boosters never had any data in people under 50 in particularly, and the bivalent data is non-existent, okay? And if there is a vaccine that should be on the market, an mRNA COVID vaccine, it should have a warning label that there's an increased risk of clots that goes up by about 50%, including pulmonary embolism, that there's a risk of myocarditis and death, that's now been established, and that it shows up in breast milk in lactating mothers. We don't know, and I would pose to the WHO, how many healthy children have died of COVID? No one knows. The CDC director doesn't know. In Germany, it was 0 children, 5 through 17 in that entire population. So how can we justify these risks for something that has no benefit in that population?
Now, we know a lot of hospitals were enjoying the jacked up reimbursements they were getting when people had broken legs and also tested positive for COVID. So that obviously happened. All right, MSNBC, Dr. Makary, I think this is very important health advice for everyone out there. Watch.
Which one? The fourth? The fourth got completely knocked down for a while. We found out the boosters, the vaccines, they don't stop the disease, but they certainly do make a big impact. If I'd taken the booster, I would have probably sneezed and said, what was that, and kept going.
Exactly.
That's the difference.
Well, Dr. Makary, it was hard to hear that Joe Scarborough was knocked down for months, they said, from COVID, but he had gotten 3 shots. But the 4th shot will lessen symptoms. I mean, that's the refrain we hear. Is that for sure?
Well, look, it's a part of a bandwagon rally call right now. It's sort of a cult, this whole idea of repeat boosters. We lost, remember, the 2 top vaccine experts at the FDA. Remember, they resigned a year and a half ago over political interference in pushing boosters. Without those 2 experts, Gruber and Kraus, we're just getting basically bandwagon advertising.
That's not what you want for a so-called vaccine or a booster.
Yeah.
We don't want bandwagon. We want actual real studies. And finally, we would like a real FDA approval, Dr. Makary, not emergency use authorization. You've been invaluable this entire almost 3 years now. Dr. Makary, thank you.
I love my right-wing friends who talk about the tree of liberty is water with the blood of patriots. If you need to work about taking on the federal government, you need some F-15s. You don't need an AR-15. I'm serious. Think about it.